the last class, we studied acids and bases and the properties. Today, we'll talk about salts. Okay? Salt. Now, in chemistry, what is salt? A salt is a compound formed by partial or complete replacement of replaceable hydrogen ion of an acid. Let me repeat it. A salt is a compound formed by the partial or complete replacement of replaceable hydrogen ion of an acid by metallic or ammonium radical. So, a salt is a compound formed when the hydrogen ion of an acid is replaced completely or partially by metallic ion or ammonium ion. Okay. So salt, like for example, sodium hydroxide and an acid. So instead of sodium hydroxide, let us talk about zinc. Okay, simple. Zinc plus sulfuric acid. H2. Or now, metal is reacted with an acid. So what is a salt? A salt is a compound formed when the hydrogen ion of an acid is replaced by the metal. So H2SO4. Instead of H2SO4, the hydrogen of sulfuric acid will be replaced by the metal zinc. So it becomes sulfuric acid becomes zinc sulfate. This is a salt. And of course, hydrogen gas. So let me tell you again, when hydrogen ion of an acid is replaced by metal, what is formed? Zinc. The hydrogen ion of the acid is replaced by zinc, so it becomes zinc sulfate, that is a salt, and hydrogen. Okay, next we talk about ammonium hydroxide. It's a base. Ammonium hydroxide is a base. A base is the oxide or hydroxide of metal or ammonium. So ammonium hydroxide plus hydrochloric acid. The hydrogen of the acid is replaced by ammonium, in this case, a positive radical, NH4 plus. Then it becomes NH4Cl, ammonium chloride. The hydrogen is replaced by ammonium and becomes ammonium chloride. And of course, this is an example. This is how salt is formed. So what is a salt again? A salt is a compound formed when the hydrogen ion of the acid is replaced by metal, any metal, or ammonium ions, partially or completely. That is called a salt. Okay. So I will give you another example of ammonium hydroxide. I will give you another example of what? Ammonium hydroxide and sulfuric acid. Okay. Ammonium hydroxide and sulfuric acid, H2SO. Now we know that hydroxide of a metal is a base and H2SO4 is an acid, sulfuric acid. Now, the hydrogen ion of an acid is replaced by sodium. What is called? Salt is formed. So instead we have Na2SO4 plus. Now we have general equations. We'll talk about the general equations later. Now why is salt and water formed? Because any base plus any acid will always form salt So this is a general equation. Any base and any acid reacts to give you a salt and water. Now what is salt? Salt is a compound formed when the hydrogen ion of an acid is replaced completely or partially replaced by ammonium or metallic ion. So that is a salt. Now, another way we can explain you what a salt is. A salt is an ionic compound which dissociates a positive ion other than hydrogen ion and negative ion other than hydroxyl ion. If a compound releases hydrogen ion as the only positive ion, what is it? It is an acid. Acid is a compound. Acid is a compound which produces hydrogen, which yields hydrogen ions as the only positive ion in its aqueous solution. And what is a base or an alkali? An alkali is a compound which releases hydroxyl ions as the only negative. And now what is a salt? Similarly, what is a salt? A salt is an ionic compound which yields positive ions other than hydroxyl ions. It will produce any positive ion but not hydrogen ion, and any negative ion but not hydroxyl ion. It will not produce hydroxyl ion. So that is a salt. For example, sodium chloride, a common salt, we use it in the kitchen. Sodium chloride will dissociate to produce Na+ and Cl-. It will produce a positive and a negative ion, but not hydrogen ion as the positive ion and not hydroxyl ion as the negative ion. So that is a salt. So an ion is a salt is an ionic compound which yields a positive ion other than hydrogen ion and a negative ion other than hydroxyl ion. So that is a salt. Okay. Now, there are basically two types of salt. There are many types of salt, but let us talk about the simple three types that you have to remember. One is acid salt, the other is normal salt, and the other is basic salt. So there are three types of salt. Basically, this is acid salt. Number 2, normal salt. And number 3, basic salt. Acid salt, normal salt, and basic salt. What is an acid salt? Let us talk about what is an acid salt. An acid salt is a salt produced when the replaceable hydrogen ion of an acid is partially replaced by a metal or ammonium ion. I want to repeat it. An acid salt is a salt formed by the partial replacement of replaceable hydrogen ion of an acid by a basic radical, that is metallic or ammonium ion. For example, NaOH and we talk about sulfuric acid, H2. And similarly, we have in another conditions reverse. Conditions reverse. Number 1, number 2. Now, if you have more of an acid than the base, the quantity of an acid is more than the base, all the hydrogen or ions of the acid will not be replaced by the metal. It is not replaced by the metal. Okay. So let me tell you again. If the concentration of or the amount of, in a simple language, in an amount of sulfuric acid is more than the base, that is sodium hydroxide, then all the hydrogen ions of an acid will not be replaced by, will not be completely replaced by the sodium ions. For example, there are instead of H2SO4, we can write, just to understand, we can write H2SO4. Now the amount of, the quantity of sulfuric acid is more than the base. Let's say in this case, only one hydrogen ion will be replaced by sodium. One hydrogen ion will be replaced by sodium. It still contains one hydrogen ion of an acid in the molecule of the salt. So therefore, this is an acid salt, and it will have all the property of that particular acid. Let me tell you again. But in this case, number one, the amount of sulfuric acid is more than the base sodium hydroxide. So therefore, both the hydrogens of in one molecule of sulfuric acid, there are two atoms of hydrogen. Only one atom of hydrogen will be replaced by the metal sodium in this case, because the amount of base is less. The amount of sodium is less in the solution of sodium hydroxide and sulfuric acid. So therefore, since there are two atoms of sulfuric acid, atoms of hydrogen in the sulfuric acid, only one hydrogen will be replaced by sodium, and it becomes an acid salt. Sodium bisulfate or sodium hydrogen sulfate. The choice is yours. Okay. Now, in this case, the concentration of base is, the amount of base is more than sulfuric acid. So in this case, what will happen? All the hydrogen ions, both the hydrogen ions of the acid, H2SO4, both the hydrogen ions of the acid, there are two ions of hydrogen in one molecule of sulfuric acid. Both of them will get replaced by sodium. So it becomes a normal salt, Na2, normal salt. It becomes normal salt. And of course, the neutralization reaction, base plus an acid will always give you salt and water. Salt and water. Is it okay? Is it understood? So what is an acid salt? An acid salt is a salt which is formed by the partial replacement of replaceable hydrogen ion by a basic radical, ammonium ion or a metallic ion. That means one hydrogen ion or two hydrogen ions of the acid will be present in the salt. So therefore it is known as acid salt. Whereas, what is a normal salt? A normal salt is a salt which is formed by the complete replacement of hydrogen ions of the acid by the metal. In this case it is sodium. So Na2, there is no hydrogen in between. So therefore it is a normal salt. So neutralization, incomplete neutralization takes place in this case to get an acid salt. In this case, complete neutralization takes place to get a normal salt. Now, another important thing that you have to remember, that suppose we have HCl, which is hydrochloric acid. These are sulfuric acid is a dibasic acid. It contains two replaceable hydrogen ions. Two replaceable hydrogen. Similarly, carbonic acid, sulfurous acid, sulfuric acid. It contains two replaceable hydrogen ions. In the case of phosphoric acid, H3PO4, there are three replaceable hydrogen ions. So, monobasic acid, here we are talking about hydrochloric acid. It has only one replaceable hydrogen ion. So, if sodium hydroxide comes and reacts with hydrochloric acid, since there is only one hydrogen replaceable hydrogen ion, this will be completely replaced by sodium. So you get NaCl and H2O. NaCl and H2O. So monobasic acid will not produce acid salt. It is the dibasic acid or phosphoric acid, tribasic acid that will produce acid salt. But monobasic acid, which contains only one replaceable hydrogen ion in the molecule, those acids will produce only normal salt and not acid salt. Please remember that. So now, just to understand what a salt is, just to understand what a salt is. HCl. This is hydrochloric acid. HNO3. This is nitric acid. H2SO4 sulfuric acid. H2CO3 carbonic acid. H3O4. This is phosphoric acid. Where does that? These are the acid compounds. From hydrochloric acid, you will get a salt called chloride. From nitric acid, you get a salt called nitrate. Sulfuric acid, from sulfuric acid, we get salt called sulfate SO4 PVC. Carbonic acid, carbonate. And phosphoric acid we get. Just to understand this, to make it simple for you to understand. Phosphate. Now, this is not chloride, this is hydrochloric acid or hydrogen chloride, nitric acid, sulfuric acid, carbonic acid, phosphoric acid. Phosphoric acid will give you a salt called phosphate. Carbonic acid will give you a salt called carbonate. Basically, in a very general way, to make things very, very simple for you to understand. Sulfuric acid will produce a salt called sulfate. Nitric acid will produce a salt called nitrate. Similarly, hydrochloric acid will produce a salt called chloride. Now, what is a salt? A salt is a compound formed when the replaceable, these hydrogen ions, will be replaced by the metal or ammonium. Suppose hydrogen of HCl will be replaced by ammonium. It becomes ammonium chloride, salt called chloride. From which acid? Hydrochloric acid. Like HNO3 is nitric acid. Now the hydrogen of the acid is replaced by, let's say, sodium. Now a metal, it becomes sodium nitrate, a salt called nitrate. Sulfuric acid, H2SO4, will produce a salt called sulfate. Like for example, if the hydrogen is replaced by copper, then it becomes copper sulfate. Now, H2CO3, if all the hydrogen ions of carbonic acid is replaced by, let's say, ammonium carbonate, then it's 1 twice CO3. And H3PO, there are 3 replaceable hydrogen of phosphoric acid. Now, all the 3 hydrogen is replaced by, let's say, aluminum, AlPO4, aluminum phosphate. And I'm sure you understood it now, that hydrochloric acid will produce a salt called chloride. It could be anything: ammonium chloride, sodium chloride, copper chloride, iron chloride, ferrous chloride, ferric chloride, so many. Nitric acid produces a salt called nitrate. It doesn't have to be only sodium nitrate. It could be ammonium nitrate, it could be copper nitrate. There are so many other nitrates. Similarly, sulfuric acid will produce a salt called sulfate, copper sulfate, and there are so many other salts of sulfate. You very well know about it. Carbonate, like calcium carbonate, ammonium carbonate in this case, and phosphoric acid will produce a salt called phosphate, like aluminum phosphate, and so many other phosphates. So this is for you to understand what a salt is. So again, what is a salt? A salt is a compound formed when the replaceable hydrogen ion of an acid is completely or partially replaced by a basic radical, metal or ammonium. Now, we talked about acid salt and normal salt, and now we will deal with a basic salt. Okay, basic salt. What is a basic salt? You just have to remember the definition. A basic salt which is formed by the partial replacement of hydroxyl radicals of diacidic or triacidic base with an acid radical. With an acid radical, which is called a basic salt. It contains a cation, that is metallic ion, a positive ion, a negative ion of there are two negative ions, hydroxyl ions of the base and anion of an acid. For example, CuOH, NO3, CuOH, NO3. It has two negative ions and one positive ion. Similarly, CuOH, C. This is basic copper chloride and this is basic copper nitrate, which contains hydroxyl ions of the base COH minus. So this is a basic salt. Again, basic salt is formed by the partial replacement of hydroxyl radicals of a diacidic or triacidic base with an acid radical. That is, it contains the cations, that is metallic, and two anions, the hydroxyl ions of the base and the anion of an acid. So this is all about the basic salt. Now, we will talk about the general properties of the salt reactions. Very, very simple. It's not very difficult. So you just have to remember the general equation. You just have to talk about the general equation. Carbonate or bicarbonate plus an acid. Carbonate or bicarbonate and an acid will always form salt, water and carbon dioxide. Salt, water and carbon dioxide. This is a general equation. Any carbonate or any bicarbonate reacts with an acid to form salt, water and carbon dioxide. You have to remember this general equation. Very important. For example, sodium bicarbonate, NaHCO3, or sodium carbonate, Na2CO. This is carbonate, sodium carbonate, and a bicarbonate, that is sodium bicarbonate. Plus, we reacted with an acid, let's say hydrochloric acid, HCl. What is produced? Salt, water, and carbon dioxide. Now, what salt is produced? Since it is, you have to understand that, since it is a monobasic acid, which contains only one replaceable hydrogen ion. So, in that case, normal salt will be formed. That is, the only metal over here is sodium. So, sodium will take the place of hydrogen and forms NaCl plus water, H2O, and carbon dioxide. It's not a balanced equation. Sodium bicarbonate, hydrochloric acid will give you salt, that is sodium chloride. Since it is hydrochloric acid, it will always produce an acid called chloride. Sodium chloride plus water and carbon dioxide. Salt, water and carbon dioxide, as you can see. Similarly, sodium carbonate in this case. Sodium carbonate and an acid will again give you, will always produce again the salt. The only metal in the reactant side is sodium. So sodium will take the place of, will replace hydrogen ion of the hydrochloric acid, and sodium chloride will be formed. And of course, since it is the reaction between carbonate and an acid, you always get salt, water, and carbon dioxide. Please remember this. It's very, very important. So instead, you can also use not only sodium carbonate. Let us talk about calcium carbonate. Let's talk about calcium carbonate, or calcium bicarbonate. CaHCO3 plus and CeCO, calcium bicarbonate and calcium carbonate. Now, since it is the reaction is between calcium carbonate and calcium bicarbonate and an acid, you get a salt or calcium chloride, CaCl2 plus water plus carbon dioxide. Now, next is calcium carbonate reacts with hydrochloric acid to form the salt. Which salt? Calcium chloride. The hydrogen ion of an acid is replaced by calcium in this state. So instead we get calcium, CaCl, calcium chloride plus water and carbon dioxide. So this is a general equation. Please you have to remember once more. Please remember it. Carbonate or bicarbonate, any carbonate or bicarbonate reacts with an acid to form salt, water, and carbon dioxide. Next, we talk about is sulfite. Sulfite and an acid. Sulfite and an acid. Sulfite and an acid. What is it from? Salt, water, and sulfur dioxide. Salt plus water plus sulfur dioxide. So to gas. For example, sulfite. Let's say Na2SO3 sulfite. Na2SO3. Na2SO3 plus again the hydrochloric acid. What is formed? Again the hydrogen ion of an acid. Salt is formed. What is a salt? A salt is a compound formed when the replaceable hydrogen ion of an acid is replaced by a metal. Right? So therefore, what is formed? Instead of hydrogen, the metal comes to take its place. So NaCl plus water, and since it is a sulfite, sulfur dioxide will be. Is it understood? Similarly, if iron sulfide, SuLPHI, sulfide plus an acid, another general equation. That was the carbonate and an acid was general equation 1. This is general equation 2, and this is general equation 3. Sulfide plus an acid will give you salt and hydrogen sulfide gas. The speciality of hydrogen sulfide gas is it smells like a rotten egg, so it has a rotten egg smell. Hydrogen sulfide gas it does not have a pleasant smell. So sulfide and an acid, for example, let's take iron sulfide. You take iron sulfide and sulfuric acid in this case. What is formed? The hydrogen ion of an acid is replaced by the metal. So FeSO4 is formed. The hydrogen ion of the acid is replaced by the metal. The metal will come and take the place of hydrogen. The hydrogen will come and combine with sulfide radical. So H2, that's how it comes into existence. That hydrogen sulfide, this hydrogen will come and combine with the sulfide and becomes hydrogen sulfide gas. So there is a double decomposition reaction where in which the compounds, they exchange their radicals. So this is a very good example of a sulfide reacting with an acid to form salt and hydrogen sulfide. Now, another topic we will discuss the last topic for today. Hydrolysis of salts. We know that acid and a base will produce salt and water. This is neutralization reaction. Acid and a base, or base and an acid will produce salt plus water. The reverse of that is called hydrolysis of salt. Salt plus water will produce acid and a base. This is called neutralization reaction. This is called neutralization reaction, and the other is this one. As salt plus water. Just the opposite of that. Just the opposite reaction of this. Acid and a base, salt and water, water plus salt, base and acid. Base plus acid. Very, very easy way to remember. It's just the opposite of hydrolysis of salt. Hydrolysis of salt is just the opposite of neutralization reaction. Acid and a base, salt plus water. Acid, salt and water produces base and acid. For example, NH4Cl. I'll give you just one example. NH4Cl plus water. What do you get? Base. Ammonium hydroxide. What do you get? Ammonium hydroxide and HCl. Base, that is a very weak base. Ammonium hydroxide, which is a very weak base, and acid, which has HCl. HCl plus NH4OH produces NH4Cl plus water. Base and an acid will give you salt and water. Salt and water produces ammonium, base and acid. So this is the very good example of hydrolysis of salt. So we have not yet come to the end of the chapter. We have to do a little bit of remaining, for example, like indicators. We have to do indicators and general properties of the salt. We will do it in the next class. So thank you so much.